What happens when the one person the fashion world dreads, the royals avoid, and Hollywood can't quite figure out suddenly demands access to the most exclusive red carpet on the planet? What happens when a woman who left the royal family, fought the monarchy, battled the British press, burned bridges in Hollywood, and then rebranded herself through WME, turns around and tells her own agency, "Get me a ticket, and make sure everyone sees me walking wearing a princess gown"? Ask yourself that for a moment. What kind of story unfolds after a declaration like that? Because according to insiders, that exact moment, that demand, is what ignited the chaos that would ripple from Los Angeles conference rooms to Manhattan boardrooms to Buckingham Palace corridors within hours of the 2026 Met Gala theme being announced. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was supposed to be a normal morning. A theme reveal, a few fashion blogs buzzing, stylists exchanging excited voice notes, designers flinging mood boards across their offices. But the moment the theme dropped, rebirth of royalty, 1,000 years of crowns, everything changed. And not in a small way, not in a quiet way, not in a cute coincidence for the fashion world type of way. No. This theme hit like a lightning bolt, because absolutely everyone knew exactly what it was going to reignite. The royal narrative Meghan Markle had spent 4 years trying to rewrite, and the global conversation she desperately wanted back under her control. Think about it. A Met Gala theme built around royalty, crowns, dynasties, rebirths, and the symbolic power of monarchy. How could Meghan Markle, a former working royal turned Hollywood figure, global controversy magnet, and self-styled humanitarian icon, resist an opportunity like that? She couldn't. She didn't. In fact, insiders say she reacted so instantly and so intensely that WME staff felt the walls shift. One even joked that the building should have had earthquake insurance for the kind of energy she brought in. But behind the humor, there was fear. Real fear. Because the Met Gala is not just a glamorous event. It's a political ecosystem. It's Anna Wintour's kingdom. It's designer territory. It's donor-funded. It's press-governed. It's strategic, delicate, and ruthlessly curated. And inserting Meghan Markle into a theme about royalty? That isn't just controversial. That's explosive. Let's zoom out for a second. Why does this story matter so much right now? Because the world has watched Meghan Markle evolve through more public identities in a decade than most celebrities do in a lifetime. Actress, duchess, runaway royal, victim, activist, podcaster, producer, failed Netflix star, struggling brand, WME client. Every chapter of her life has been framed as a narrative pivot, a reinvention, a reclamation. But underneath all of these reinventions lies an obsession, one she rarely shows publicly, but everyone close to her allegedly knows is always simmering. She wants to control her image as a princess, not a working royal, not a ribbon-cutting duchess, not a side character in the House of Windsor. A princess, full stop. And according to people in the room that day, when Meghan saw the 2026 Met Gala theme, something clicked or snapped, depending on who you ask. She saw an opening, a storyline, a stage big enough, prestigious enough, symbolic enough to rebrand herself in a single night. One insider said she whispered something like, "It's perfect, this is how it should have been." Another claimed she said, "I'm going. Make it happen." Whether she said those exact words or not, what followed is undisputed. She stormed, not walked, stormed, into a WME strategy meeting demanding one thing: get me a ticket. But a ticket wasn't all she wanted. She wanted the moment, the spectacle, the redemption arc. She wanted to step onto those steps in a princess-style gown that would send a message louder than any interview or documentary could. She wanted the world to see her in the role she felt she was denied, dismissed from, or overshadowed in. And when she told WME she wanted to dress as a princess, according to sources, the room froze. Because even for Meghan, who has no shortage of bold moves and headline-grabbing decisions, this was on another level. And WME knew it. Let's make something very clear before we go further. WME is not new to controversy. They manage complicated stars. They navigate scandals. They run crisis PR like surgeons. But this was different. Because the Met Gala doesn't play by agency rules. It plays by Anna Wintour's rules. You don't call the Met Gala. You don't demand anything from the Met Gala. You don't insist on an invitation because it fits your narrative. Invitations are a privilege, selectively offered, carefully curated, politically balanced. Even A-list celebrities get rejected every single year. So when Meghan declared she was going, WME felt the immediate crackle of conflict. Because saying Meghan Markle wants to attend the Met Gala dressed as a princess isn't just a request. It's a cultural earthquake. The backlash potential was enormous. Fashion houses would panic. Royal commentators would erupt. Buckingham Palace would monitor. British tabloids would salivate. American media would create think pieces overnight. Designers would choose sides. Donors would get nervous. And Anna Wintour, who famously does not like chaos she didn't plan, would be forced to respond. But instead of slowing down, instead of analyzing, instead of thinking through implications, Meghan went into full ambition mode. She reportedly started pitching ideas for what the gown should represent. Royal freedom, modern monarchy, heritage reclaimed. Phrases that sound poetic until you remember that the real monarchy, the actual monarchy, still exists and does not appreciate symbolic jabs wrapped in couture. Meghan wanted symbolism, layers, drama, references to royal history, but with a fresh, feminist spin. She wanted to embody a princess, but on her terms, not traditional ones, not British ones, not Windsor ones. And the more she explained her vision, the more WME leadership panicked. Because here's the twist no one is ready for. Meghan wasn't simply trying to attend the Met Gala. She was trying to weaponize it. She saw it as a stage for a global relaunch. She saw it as the ultimate reset button, a way to reclaim power, sympathy, visibility, and narrative control, all in a single night. And in Meghan's mind, dressing as a princess wasn't cosplay. It wasn't aesthetic. It wasn't storytelling. It was justice. Ask yourself this. Has Meghan ever made a public move that wasn't strategic? Has she ever taken a fashion moment that didn't come with a message? Has she ever let an opportunity to reframe a narrative go unused? Of course not. So why would she start now? Especially when the Met Gala theme practically invited her to stir the pot. But WME knew the risks. They knew the potential fallout. They knew that if Meghan showed up in a princess gown, even an abstract one, headlines would explode with accusations of mockery, tension, royal shade, opportunism, and attention-seeking. They knew the monarchy drama would flare up again. They knew donors might revolt. They knew designers would become skittish, terrified of being caught in the crossfire between Meghan Markle and Buckingham Palace. And yet, despite all of this, Meghan doubled down. She didn't care about repercussions. She didn't care about backlash. She cared about the moment. And she believed she deserved it. So why does this matter right now, in this exact cultural moment? Because it shows a deeper pattern, a deeper question about celebrity culture, power, and mythology. What happens when a celebrity tries to rewrite her story through the biggest fashion stage in the world? What happens when a royal-adjacent figure attempts to reclaim royal imagery in front of millions of viewers, thousands of cameras, and billions of eyes waiting to analyze every detail? What happens when personal ambition collides directly with global symbolism? This isn't just a story about a woman wanting a red carpet invitation. It's a story about identity, power, control, reinvention. It's a story about a person trying desperately to write the ending of the fairy tale she believes she never got, even if it means sparking a cultural wildfire to do it. And as we explore this saga chapter by chapter, you'll see how every decision Meghan made, every move WME attempted to manage, every rumor from Buckingham Palace, and every whisper in the fashion world pushed this situation into darker, more chaotic territory. Because here's the part no one outside of WME knew. What Meghan demanded next didn't just alarm her agency. It terrified them. It forced internal battles. It triggered heated calls. It even caused some to question whether keeping Meghan as a client was worth the risk. And yet, Meghan didn't back down. She insisted. She pressured. She pushed. And what she was prepared to do if she didn't get her way. Well, that's where this story takes a turn no one saw coming. But before we get there, before we get into the confrontations, the ultimatums, the designer wars, the donor backlash, the royal responses, and the Hollywood whispers, you need to understand the first moment where this saga became irreversible. Because it didn't happen on a red carpet, or in a fashion house, or in a palace briefing room. It happened in a single WME boardroom where Meghan Markle looked her agents in the eye and delivered a demand that would reshape the next 6 months of her public life. And after that moment, nothing, not her image, not her relationships, not her reputation, would ever be the same again. Because what came next? What Meghan said next? What she threatened next? Changed everything. What do you think a person does in the exact moment they realize the world has just handed them the storyline they've been waiting for? Do they pause? Do they breathe? Do they think strategically? Or do they react with pure, unfiltered instinct, the kind that exposes everything simmering beneath the surface? Because according to insiders, Meghan Markle didn't pause for a single breath the moment she saw the 2026 Met Gala theme. She reacted instantly, emotionally, explosively, and that reaction became the spark that would ignite the entire saga you're about to watch unfold. The story begins in the early morning, around the time Los Angeles is still waking up, but New York is already fully alive. Meghan, who is known for having alerts set for certain cultural events, supposedly had someone forward the theme reveal to her the moment it went public. But here's the part that keeps coming up in insider reports. They say she didn't just read the theme. She stared at it. Stared like it was some long-awaited prophecy. Stared like every frustration she'd ever felt, every headline she hated, every royal snub, every PR backlash, suddenly had a counterattack delivered neatly into her hands. Rebirth of royalty. 1,000 years of crowns. 6 words. Just 6. But for Meghan, they weren't just 6 words. They were a door, a key, a mirror, a stage, a second chance, a reclamation. And according to one source, the first thing she said wasn't subtle, wasn't measured. It was a simple, electric, "Oh my God, this is it." Think about what those words mean. This is it. This is what? This is the moment she'd been waiting for? The opportunity she believed she was denied? The chance to rewrite her royal identity, to overshadow the narratives the British press carved into stone? Or was it something deeper, something almost primal, like the desire to remind the world she once stood next to a throne, and in her mind, she should still be treated like she's only one step away from it? How do you interpret those words? Because the way insiders interpret them varies wildly, and those variations tell us everything. Some insiders say Meghan meant it as a triumphant, finally, a moment for me to shine again. Others claim it was a competitive spark, a realization that she could overshadow the royals on their own symbolic turf. A few said she immediately muttered Kate's name. Whether that's true or exaggerated, it wouldn't be surprising. Meghan's feud with the Princess of Wales has become a pop cultural storyline of its own. One Meghan knows is both a curse and a branding opportunity. But the version that keeps resurfacing, whispered almost nervously, is that Meghan said something far more revealing. "I should have been the one they celebrated." If that line is true, it explains everything that followed. Because from that moment forward, this wasn't just about attending the Met Gala. It wasn't just about fashion. It wasn't just about visibility. It was about rewriting a chapter she believed the world wrote wrong. And when someone feels the world wrote their story wrong, they don't ask politely for a chance to fix it. They demand the rewrite. So Meghan grabbed her phone. Fast. People who were with her that morning say she didn't hesitate. She started texting members of her team before many of them were even awake. They described it like being hit with a tsunami of messages. One said she sent paragraphs. Another said she sent voice notes so fast she barely breathed between sentences. And a third said she didn't ask to discuss the theme. She told them to prepare to move on it. Move on it. Not consider it. Not evaluate it. Move. The theme didn't inspire her. It activated her. But if you want to understand why Meghan reacted this way, you need to look at what the Met Gala means culturally, especially to someone like her. The Met Gala is the closest thing America has to a royal court. A place of hierarchy, power, status, symbolism, and legacy. The steps are her kingdom come moment. The cameras are her global audience. The dress is her weapon. The theme is her narrative canvas. And Anna Wintour is the gatekeeper of it all, the queen maker of fashion. It's the exact kind of space Meghan has always wanted to stand in, uninterrupted, unchallenged, and universally praised. But here's where the tension begins. Meghan hasn't been invited in years. In Hollywood terms, that's not an oversight, it's a message. And she knows it. which is exactly why the 2026 theme felt personal. This wasn't a random fashion motif. This wasn't a safe theme like Space Age Reimaginings or Garden of Dreams. This was royalty, her territory, her past, her controversy, her wound, her ambition, her whole story condensed into a theme dripping with symbolism. And according to reports, she saw that symbolism as her chance to force her way back into the room that had quietly closed its doors on her. So what did she do next? She asked for a meeting, not next week, not later that afternoon, not sometime soon. Immediately, one insider said she didn't even phrase it as a request, called WME. Now, tell them we're meeting today. This is urgent. Her team scrambled. Schedules moved. Calendars reshuffled. Assistants panicked. People who weren't even in the office, yet were suddenly racing across the city. Because when Meghan wants something now, she means now. But here's where the emotional spike kicks in. The part people close to her reportedly found both concerning and revealing. They say she kept repeating variations of the same idea. I need to reclaim this. This is my moment. This is my chance to reset. This is how I show them. As if the theme wasn't just an announcement. It was a challenge issued directly to her. As if the fashion world, the royals, the tabloids, the critics, and her former life were all staring at her, daring her to step back into the role she once held but never fully mastered. And in Meghan's mind, she was ready to take the dare. But let's talk about the contradiction at the heart of this moment. Because contradictions make stories rich, and Meghan's contradictions make them explosive. Here is a woman who has publicly distanced herself from the monarchy, criticized it, dismantled it in interviews, and positioned herself as someone who rejected royal life for freedom and authenticity. Yet here she is, the second a royal-themed Met Gala is announced, scrambling to embody a princess again. Why? Why chase a title you walked away from? Why chase symbolism you once called oppressive? Why chase a crown you said caused suffering? These contradictions aren't flaws. They're motivations. They're the emotional engines that push her into decisions that captivate millions. And this Met Gala theme didn't expose a new contradiction. It magnified one that's always been there. The desire to reject the monarchy and the desire to still shine in its shadow. It's the duality that keeps Meghan riveting. And it's the duality that made her walk into WME that day like a woman possessed. When she arrived, staff were already tense. They weren't sure if she wanted a strategy session, a brainstorming meeting, or a crisis response. Because with Meghan, all three can look identical. But what she wanted was simple, direct, uncompromising. I want a ticket, and I want to dress as a princess. People in the room say that sentence landed like a dropped chandelier. It wasn't the words. It was the tone. Confident, expectant, unshakable. As if she had already decided it would happen and was informing the agency as a mere formality. But here's where this becomes crucial for Chapter 1. The moment Meghan said those words, the room froze. Because WME understood something she didn't, or something she refused to consider. The Met Gala theme wasn't an opportunity. It was a minefield full of politics, donors, designers, royal sensitivities, cultural tensions, and decades of Anna Wintour's unspoken rules. A minefield that Meghan was now marching into barefoot, holding a torch, demanding the agency walk with her. And before the agency could gather their thoughts, before anyone could explain the cost, the backlash, the risks, the international controversy that would erupt, Meghan sat down, leaned forward, and delivered the sentence that turned this from an ambitious idea into a full-blown crisis. Get me that ticket, whatever it takes. And that was the moment WME realized this situation wasn't going to be controlled. This wasn't going to be negotiated. This wasn't going to be gently redirected. This was going to be war. Because what Meghan said after that, the threat she made, the leverage she attempted, the pressure she applied, would send the entire agency into panic mode. And what came next would force people in that room to take sides in a way no one expected. What do you think the atmosphere feels like when someone walks into a room convinced the world owes them something? Not hope, not excitement, not even confidence. Something sharper, something heavier, something that makes everyone else sit up straighter without even realizing why. That was the exact energy insiders say Meghan Markle carried with her when she stepped into the WME conference room that morning. The morning that wouldn't just reshape her public future, but expose cracks inside one of the most powerful agencies on the planet. Because the moment she crossed the threshold, witnesses say the air actually changed. Not figuratively, literally. One staffer described it as a gust of tension. Another said the room felt too small. And a third said the silence felt loaded, like everyone was waiting for the first explosion. And here's the thing. WME handles crises all the time. They manage actors with meltdowns, musicians with scandals, influencers with lawsuits. They've seen chaos. They've survived chaos. But Meghan? Meghan became a different category the moment she linked herself back to royalty, even symbolically. Because royalty isn't just a theme. It's an international trigger, a political minefield, a media frenzy, a global spectacle tied to centuries of power, pain, and public scrutiny. So when Meghan walked in and delivered her now infamous demand, "Get me that ticket, whatever it takes," the room didn't just stiffen. It fractured. Let's zoom in on that moment. Meghan sat down at the long glass conference table, back straight, eyes sharp, phone face down like a declaration that she was here to talk, not text. The agents didn't sit immediately. They hovered for a second, exchanging looks the way people do when they're silently asking each other, "Are we really doing this today?" And the lead agent, after a beat too long, cleared his throat and began with something like, "Let's talk through the strategy." Strategy. A perfectly harmless word that Meghan reportedly hated in that moment. Because in her mind, this wasn't about strategy. This wasn't about negotiation or risk assessment or PR mitigation. This was about desire, reclamation, an identity she believed she deserved to embody publicly without anyone gatekeeping her access to it. So when the agent said strategy, Meghan immediately cut in. "It's not complicated. I want the ticket." And before anyone could respond, she added the line that would become the unofficial mantra of the entire scandal. "This is my moment. You know that. And I'm not letting anyone take it from me." Read that again. "I'm not letting anyone take it from me." Who was anyone? Anna Wintour? Buckingham Palace? The fashion world? The media? Kate? All of them. This is where the emotional layers begin. Because beneath the polished words, people in the room felt something deeper: urgency, need. A sense that Meghan wasn't just chasing attention, she was chasing resolution. As if she genuinely believed stepping onto those Met steps dressed as a princess would rewrite history, silence critics, repair wounds, and reshape her reputation all at once. But WME wasn't emotionally driven. They were strategically terrified. You need to understand why. An invitation to the Met Gala is not secured through brute force. It isn't won by insisting. It isn't granted by entitlement. It is negotiated delicately with designers, donors, Vogue executives, brand partners, board members. And this year, with a theme directly tied to the monarchy, every fashion house was already walking on eggshells. Designers fear controversy like the plague. Board members fear donor backlash. Anna Wintour fears loss of control. And donors fear political optics. Now imagine adding Meghan Markle, the lightning rod, into the middle of that storm. One WME agent finally spoke up, gently. "Meghan, we need to consider how this will be received." And insiders say Meghan's reaction was immediate and fiery. "Why does everyone keep worrying about how I'll be received?" she snapped. "I'm not doing anything wrong. The theme fits me perfectly. If anything, I should be the person they want there." It wasn't arrogance. It was conviction. And conviction is far harder to negotiate with. Another agent chimed in, trying to soften the impact. "It's not about deserving to be there. It's about the politics behind this particular theme." "Politics," Meghan repeated, incredulous. "I lived it. I survived it. I know it better than anyone in that building." That line sliced through the room. Because she wasn't wrong. She did survive it. But survival doesn't guarantee acceptance. Survival doesn't guarantee support. And survival absolutely does not guarantee a Met Gala invitation during a theme about crowns. This is where the conversation took on a sharper edge. WME gently tried to explain the risk. "Buckingham Palace will definitely react to this. Reporters will drag you. Fashion houses will hesitate. The British tabloids will explode." Meghan leaned forward. "They drag me anyway. They talk about me anyway. So why shouldn't I shape the story for once?" Again, not arrogance. Ambition. frustrated ambition. And then came the moment that witnesses say turned the meeting from tense to dangerous. The lead agent, trying to keep the peace, said quietly, "We may need to take a step back and create a longer-term plan for your reentry into events like this." Reentry. That word landed like a slap. Meghan had not considered herself out, but WME had. Her jaw tightened. Her voice dropped. And with absolute seriousness, she said, "I don't need a reentry plan. What I need is for you to do your job." Those words echoed around the room long after they were spoken, because that was not just frustration. That was a threat. It wasn't spelled out fully, not yet. But the implication was unmistakable. Deliver what I want, or I will question whether you're capable of representing me at all. Meanwhile, the agents exchanged glances that said everything they didn't dare say aloud. This wasn't going to be a simple client request. This was going to be a battle. A tug-of-war between ambition and reality, ego and diplomacy, desire and logistics. Then something unexpected happened. One agent, younger, newer, still idealistic, asked the question others were too afraid to voice. "What exactly do you plan to wear?" A harmless question, a basic question, a logistical question. But Meghan answered it in a way that made the room tilt. "I want a princess gown, not a couture piece, not a symbolic interpretation, not a subtle nod. A princess gown." And she didn't stop there. "I wanted to make a statement. I wanted to represent rebirth, freedom, power. I want people to understand what I've come through." Her words spiraled out, emotional, driven, almost poetic, but the agents weren't listening to the symbolism. They were hearing the implications. A princess gown at a royal-themed Met Gala, worn by the woman who left the monarchy, who criticized the monarchy, who was cut off from royal duties, who was publicly dismissed by the palace, who still holds a title but not the institution's support. Fashion houses would panic. Designers would run. Anna Wintour would narrow her eyes. The palace would prepare press briefings before she even stepped on the carpet. And Meghan wasn't hearing any of that. So one agent, finally breaking, said, "Meghan, wearing a princess gown might be interpreted as mocking the monarchy." And Meghan responded instantly, "It's not mocking. It's reclaiming." Reclaiming. That word hung in the air like incense, thick, intoxicating, overwhelming. Because that was the heart of it. That was the real motivation. This wasn't about the Met Gala. It was about rewriting her royal story with one dramatic, unforgettable visual. But here's where the twist arrives. The part that sources say made the tension in the room spike to dangerous levels. Meghan stood up. Not to leave. Not to pace. But to make a point. She looked around the room and said, "I'm not asking if I should go. I'm telling you I am going. I just need you to secure the ticket." Staffers later said it felt like Meghan wasn't speaking to WME. She was speaking through them. As if she saw the Met Gala as her stage, and the agency was simply the crew responsible for moving the set pieces around her. And that's when the conversation shifted into something far more alarming. Because one agent, perhaps braver than the rest, finally said the words everyone was afraid to say. "We can try, but there's a real possibility Anna Wintour won't approve this." Witnesses swear the temperature in the room actually dropped. Meghan's expression didn't change at first, but her eyes did. They hardened, just slightly, like a glass door clicking shut. And then she said something no one was prepared for. "Then I'll give her a reason she can't say no." Silence. Heavy. Thick. Confused. Frightened. A reason she can't say no? What does that mean? A PR move? A threat? A reveal? A leverage play? WME didn't know. But what she said next, what she hinted at next, is what pushed the room into full crisis mode. Because Meghan began describing a plan so bold, so risky, so shockingly strategic that some agents reportedly questioned whether they were legally or ethically allowed to participate in it. And that plan, the first draft of it, would turn into the biggest internal divide WME had seen in years. Because what Meghan proposed next wasn't just ambitious. It was dangerous. And it left the agency with one terrifying question. If they didn't get her the ticket, what exactly was Meghan Markle prepared to do? Have you ever watched someone lay out a plan so bold, so emotionally loaded, so dripping with symbolism that you could practically feel the tension in the room shifting with every word they spoke? Have you ever seen someone present an idea that wasn't just a strategy, but a worldview, a declaration of who they believe they truly are? Because that's exactly what happened in that WME conference room when Meghan Markle began unveiling what insiders now call her Princess Image Plan, a vision that was part branding, part revenge, part fantasy, and part weapon. And if you thought the confrontation in the previous chapter was intense, what came next made it feel like a warm-up. The moment Meghan uttered the words, "Then I'll give Anna a reason she can't say no," the room fell silent. But not the comfortable silence of people waiting. This was the silence of people bracing. Bracing for impact. Bracing for the next twist. Bracing for the kind of declaration that could get someone fired, blacklisted, or vaulted into global headlines. Possibly all three at once. Meghan took a breath. Not a nervous one. Not a hesitant one. A controlled, deliberate inhale. The kind someone takes before launching into a speech they've already rehearsed in their mind. Then she began. "I have a story to tell," she said, voice steady. "And the Met Gala is the biggest global stage for it." That sentence hit like a drumline. Because it wasn't about a gown anymore. It wasn't about a ticket. It wasn't even about Anna Wintour. It was about a story. Her version of her story. And she was ready to weaponize the theme to deliver it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. A thick one, stuffed with pages, color printouts, inspirational images, and what insiders say looked suspiciously like branding notes. Some swear it was labeled Princess Arc, Reclamation Strategy. Others say it was labeled Rebrand 2026. Whether or not those exact titles existed, the truth is this. Meghan didn't just show up with emotion. She showed up with a strategy. And that's when everyone realized something crucial. Meghan's reaction to the Met Gala theme wasn't impulsive. It wasn't random. It wasn't a moment of excitement. It was a trigger, one that activated a plan she had already been crafting quietly, privately, and meticulously. She opened the folder, slid it across the table, and said the sentence that made people truly understand the scale of what she was proposing. "I've been working on this for months. Months. Before the theme was announced. Before WME even knew they'd be dealing with a royal-themed storm. Before anyone realized Meghan was preparing something bigger than a comeback. She was preparing a coronation." The agents exchanged glances. Some stunned, some anxious, some intrigued, some terrified. Because Meghan wasn't just plotting a fashion moment. She was plotting a narrative takeover. She began flipping through the pages. Mood boards, color palettes, sketches of gowns, historical references to royal regalia, modern reinterpretations of crowns, side-by-side comparisons of princess silhouettes through the decades. And then, the piece de resistance. Images of Meghan herself, digitally rendered in various princess archetypes. Think about that for a moment. She didn't have invitations. She didn't have a designer secured. She didn't have approval from anyone involved with the Met Gala. But she already had mock-ups of herself on the steps. Not as a duchess. Not as a Hollywood figure. As a princess. She pointed to one of the images, an illustration of herself in a flowing champagne gown with a structured bodice, symbolic motifs, and a crown-like headpiece, and said something that made several people in the room suck in their breath. "This is who I should have been allowed to be." Allowed. That word reverberated, because it spelled out her entire emotional foundation. She didn't see this as ambition. She saw it as restoration, as rectification, as justice. And suddenly, the room understood. The Met Gala wasn't the goal, it was the stage. The real goal was the reclaiming of a narrative she believed had been stolen from her. Meghan continued flipping through the pages like a professor presenting a thesis. Her plan included color symbolism, gold for rebirth, white for innocence, blue for resilience. Fabric notes, silk to evoke royalty, organza for modernity, embroidery for legacy. Historical references, Diana's gowns, Grace Kelly's coronation looks, Renaissance princesses, Victorian iconography. Modern feminist overlays, sovereignty over self, breaking tradition, reclaiming narrative. Photographic angles for maximum press impact. Talking point frameworks for interviews. Potential cover lines for magazines. Suggested captions for social media rollout. She wasn't preparing for the Met Gala. She was preparing for a global rebranding. And then came the kicker. The moment the agents realized this wasn't just about aesthetics. Meghan had created a three-part arc. The reveal, her entrance on the steps. The redemption, interviews explaining her symbolic gown. The rebirth, a documentary-style release exploring her journey from oppression to empowerment. Yes, you read that correctly. Meghan was planning Met Gala night as Act 1 of a three-part media arc, a Met Gala entrance tied into a larger royal reclamation narrative. And at the center of this plan, a princess gown, not a metaphor, not an interpretation, a literal princess gown, designed intentionally to evoke royal lineage, feminine resilience, and historical gravitas, but with modern messaging to frame her as the princess of her own making. One agent finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air like smoke. Meghan, do you realize how the palace will respond to this? She didn't hesitate. They can respond however they want, she said. They don't control me anymore. Bold, defiant, almost cinematic. But here's where the contradictions began seeping through. Contradictions that made the agents shift uncomfortably in their seats. She didn't want the monarchy's control, but she wanted the monarchy's imagery. She rejected the royal institution, but she wanted to embody the princess archetype. She walked away from the crown, but she wanted the symbolism of wearing one on the world's biggest fashion stage. Contradictions don't weaken a story, they make it complex. But they also make it combustible. And the WME team knew the fuel was stacking fast. As Meghan laid out her vision, showing them more images, some dramatic, some regal, some borderline provocative. The agents weren't just thinking, how do we make this happen? They were thinking, how do we survive the fallout? Because this wasn't a simple request. This was a declaration of war against expectations, traditions, reputations, and political realities. And then Meghan turned to the next page, and the room's temperature dropped again. She had sketched out potential taglines. Yes, taglines. For magazines. For Vogue. For Netflix. For social media. Taglines like, reborn in her own crown. The princess they never let her be. Sovereign. Unshaken. Unapologetic. Royalty reimagined. One agent whispered, barely audible, "Oh my God," because they knew something she didn't. These taglines were not rebranding. They were provocation. Direct provocation. Provocation aimed at the British monarchy. Provocation aimed at Kate. Provocation aimed at the media. Provocation aimed at anyone who believed Meghan should stay far away from royal symbolism. And Meghan? She didn't see provocation. She saw liberation. "I deserve this moment," she said softly, almost whispering. "After everything, I deserve to show who I really am." Emotion swelled in her voice. This wasn't vanity. It was pain. It was longing. It was defiance wrapped in vulnerability. And that's what made the agents hesitate. Because they weren't just dealing with a client. They were dealing with someone who was emotionally invested in rewriting the narrative of her entire life. Which made what came next even more intense. Because after presenting the mood boards, the symbolism, the message, the arc, she revealed the final piece of the plan. A secret she had not told anyone at WME before. A detail so startling that one witness said it shifted the energy in the room completely. She said, "And I've already contacted a designer willing to create the gown." That sentence dropped like a stone. She reached into her phone, tapped a few times, and held up a message thread. A designer. A major one. One who had worked with royalty before. She had gone behind WME's back. She had bypassed the system. Bypassed protocol. Bypassed diplomacy. Bypassed the very people tasked with managing her. She had taken the first step alone, and now expected the agency to follow her down the path she'd paved. The agents froze. Because this changed everything. This wasn't a proposal. This wasn't a pitch. This wasn't a plan seeking approval. This was happening, with or without them. And that realization created the single biggest fracture inside WME up to that point. Some agents believed they needed to support her for loyalty, for publicity, for the potential payoff. Others believed they needed to shut this down, to protect the agency, protect clients, protect relationships with donors and designers. But no one said a word. Not yet. Because Meghan wasn't finished. She looked around the table, lifted her chin, and delivered the line that set the entire next chapter of the saga in motion. "If WME doesn't want to be part of this, that's fine, but I will do it anyway." And that sentence forced WME into a corner. Because if your client threatens to move forward without representation, you have only two options. You either take control, or you lose control. And as the room sat in stunned silence, Meghan added one final line. The line that would ignite the internal war at WME that defined the rest of the saga. So tell me now, are you with me or not? What happens when a room full of powerful Hollywood agents suddenly realizes they've been backed into a corner by their own client? What do you think it feels like when every person present knows the next sentence they speak could either explode their agency's relationship with the fashion world or explode their relationship with Meghan Markle? Because that's exactly where Chapter 4 begins. In the razor-thin moment after Meghan asked the question no client should ever ask so bluntly. Are you with me or not? Silence. Thick. Motionless. Unbending. Not because they didn't know what to say, but because they knew exactly what was at stake. And here's the thing most people don't realize. WME is not simply an agency. It's a political machine, a relationship ecosystem, a carefully woven tapestry of partnerships, alliances, favors, debts, and invisible understandings. The Met Gala sits at the center of many of those connections. Designers, Vogue, donors, sponsors, celebrity clients, all roads converge on that single night. So when Meghan demanded a Met Gala ticket backed by a princess narrative, she wasn't just asking for access. She was asking WME to risk burning bridges that took decades to build. One agent finally cleared his throat, quietly, as if he was afraid even the air might snap if he breathed too loudly. Meghan, we're with you, he began, voice cautious. But we need to talk about the realities here. That word again. Realities. The same word Meghan hated in Chapter 2. Her expression didn't soften. Her gaze didn't shift. Her shoulders didn't drop. If anything, she became still, the kind of stillness people mistake for calm when it's actually containment, a lid pressed hard onto boiling water. What realities? She asked flatly. The lead agent inhaled, the kind of inhale that comes before delivering news you know will not land well. Anna Wintour is extremely protective of the Met Gala's political atmosphere, he said. This year's theme is sensitive. You know that better than anyone. Meghan didn't blink. Exactly. So I fit it perfectly. Another agent, older, more diplomatic, added cautiously. It's not about whether you fit the theme. It's about how it will be perceived. That set Meghan off like a spark falling into a dark room filled with gasoline fumes. Why is my presence always about what they perceive? She snapped. I'm not mocking anyone. I'm reclaiming something. I have a right to tell my story. The agents didn't disagree, not out loud. But their silence spoke volumes. Because Meghan's story wasn't the problem. The timing was. The symbolism was. The royal optics were. They were trying to protect her, and themselves, from an international catastrophe that could swallow them whole. But Meghan wasn't hearing protection. She was hearing limitation, obstruction, doubt. And nothing enrages her more than doubt. One of the younger agents, probably hoping to reset the room, gently said, Look, Meghan, this idea is compelling. But we need buy-in from multiple people to make this happen. Designers, Vogue, donors, board members. We can't force the Met Gala to. Before he could finish, Meghan raised her hand, not aggressively, but with authority. Stop, she said. You're all talking like I'm a risk. I'm not a risk. I'm a moment. I'm a story. I'm relevance. Her voice didn't waver. Her certainty didn't falter. If anything, she doubled down. And that's why I need that ticket. WME agents exchanged looks again, this time not of confusion, but of calculation. Because now they had a problem bigger than logistics. Meghan wasn't making a request. She was making a declaration. And they were being commanded to comply. Finally, the lead agent shifted forward, elbows on the table. The posture people take when they're about to drop the truth they've been holding back. Meghan, he said, voice steadier now. You're asking us to participate in something that could be interpreted as an attack on the monarchy. She laughed under her breath. Not a full laugh, but a sharp exhale that carried more bitterness than humor. An attack, she retorted. No, I'm not attacking anyone. I'm claiming my space. That's not aggression. That's self-definition. Sharp. Convincing. Emotionally charged. But it didn't address the core issue. The outside world wouldn't see this as self-definition. They'd see it as provocation. Another agent took a turn, choosing words as if each one could detonate a bomb. The monarchy is already under public scrutiny. Kate's health issues. The king's health recovery. The UK's political climate. The last thing they want is for the Met Gala to turn into a referendum on royal drama. Meghan's response came instantly. Then they shouldn't have done what they did to me. And there it was. The pain behind the ambition. The wound behind the plan. The reason none of this was negotiable. But WME wasn't finished. Because now came the pushback. The real pushback. The kind that exposes the cracks in even the strongest alliances. The lead agent continued, carefully. We need to avoid a scenario where your appearance overshadows the event's purpose. Meghan raised an eyebrow. My attendance would enhance the event. No, he said gently but firmly. It would dominate it. A hush fell. He wasn't wrong. She would dominate it. Every camera, every headline, every article, every panel discussion. But dominance wasn't always good. Not in the world of fashion diplomacy. Not in an event curated down to every molecule of aesthetic intention. Meghan crossed her arms, a subtle shift, but one loaded with meaning. So what you're saying, she said slowly, is that you're worried I'll steal the spotlight. The agent didn't deny it. He just didn't speak. Which, to Meghan, was worse. Unbelievable, she muttered. You're afraid of success. No, another agent said softly. We're afraid of consequences. That was the line that changed the atmosphere. Consequences. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Consequences for who? She asked quietly. That question hung there like a blade. For Meghan? For WME? For designers? For Vogue? For relationships with Buckingham Palace that certain executives want to keep intact? The agents didn't answer. So Meghan did. For me, she said. The consequences are always for me. And for a split second, her armor cracked. Not visibly, not dramatically, but subtly. Enough for the room to feel the emotional undercurrent beneath her defiance. But the vulnerability evaporated quickly, because Meghan, emotionally intelligent and strategically sharp, sensed their hesitation. And pivoted back into control. You're forgetting something, she said, tone tightening. I am your most talked about client. I generate global coverage whenever I make a move. That kind of attention is rare. It's valuable. And you want that, until it scares you. The agents didn't deny it. They couldn't, because she was right. Meghan is global coverage. And global coverage is currency. But high currency always brings high risk. And that was the dilemma tearing the room apart. One agent, perhaps foolishly, decided to raise another point. Even if we get you in, Meghan, the dress itself will be controversial. Meghan's expression sharpened. Controversy isn't always bad. No, the agent said. But royal controversy? That's different. Then came the sentence that finally pushed Meghan from frustration into open anger. We need to protect you from yourself. Her entire posture changed. Gone was the controlled strategist. Gone was the poised performer. Gone was the persuasive visionary. In her place stood someone deeply offended. Protect me from myself? She repeated, incredulous. Do you hear yourselves? You sound like the palace. That hit WME harder than she realized. Because she wasn't comparing them to critics. She wasn't comparing them to tabloids. She was comparing them to the monarchy, the very entity she claims mistreated her. That comparison cracked the agency's neutrality. Several agents recoiled. One dropped his pen. Another whispered, That's not fair. Meghan didn't back down. What's not fair is expecting me to shrink myself to make other people comfortable, she shot back. The tension snapped like a wire under strain. But here's where the twist arrives. The emotional twist that complicated everything. Despite the anger, despite the pushback, despite the fear in the room, some agents believed in her vision. Not because they thought it was safe. Not because they thought it was wise. But because they saw something in her. Something raw, ambitious, determined. This is her moment. One whispered to another. She's right. It would redefine her story. She could own the narrative again. She just needs a platform. The room was dividing. Silently, subtly, but undeniably. And Meghan sensed it. She pressed her advantage. You're not thinking big enough, she said. This isn't just about one night. This is about my legacy, my image, my place in the global conversation. Global conversation. That phrase echoed like a mantra. Because that was her goal. Not fashion, not revenge, not optics. Legacy. But WME wasn't giving in, not yet. Meghan, the lead agent said slowly, carefully, even if we supported this, which some of us are willing to consider, you need to understand something. He paused. gathered himself, prepared for the explosion. You may think you're reclaiming the princess image, but the rest of the world might see it as parody. That landed like an arrow. Meghan's face didn't flinch, but her fingers clenched the edge of the table for a fraction of a second. And then she spoke, voice quiet but blazing. "I'm not a parody." "I know," the agent replied gently. "But the world. Then I'll make them see me differently." "How?" he asked. And that's when Meghan revealed the next twist, the one that made half the room gasp and the other half panic. She said, "I'm going to speak publicly about what the monarchy took from me." One agent froze mid-breath. Another whispered, "Oh no." A third said under their breath, "This is going to blow everything up." Because Meghan wasn't talking about vague comments. She was talking about a reveal, a confession, a truth bomb, something explosive enough to force the world, and the Met Gala, to see her not as a joke, but as a woman wronged. And she wasn't finished. "If I have to tell the truth to get that ticket," Meghan continued, "I will." Silence. Horrified silence. Because Meghan had just crossed a line, not morally, but strategically. She had just introduced the threat. Not directly, not explicitly, but unmistakably. "Give me the platform, or I will make my own." And that was the moment WME realized they weren't dealing with a client making a request. They were dealing with a client willing to detonate her own past, and theirs. If she didn't get her way, and what Meghan said next, what she revealed next, what she promised next, would tear WME into factions and push the entire situation into a crisis no one could stop. What happens when ambition meets reality head-on? Not in a symbolic way, not in an emotional way, but in the cold, hard, immovable way that only the fashion world can deliver. What happens when someone believes the universe has aligned perfectly for their big moment, only to discover that the gatekeepers of glamour don't share that belief? Because that's exactly what unfolded next in this saga. The very moment Meghan Markle discovered that wanting a princess gown and securing a princess gown were two entirely different things. And here's the twist. The problem wasn't the dress. It was the designers. The people who create the vision. The people who shape the night. The people whose reputations live or die on red carpets. The people who know the difference between a moment and a disaster. But before we get there, we have to go back to the end of Chapter 4. The moment Meghan essentially said she'd go scorched earth if WME didn't deliver her Met Gala access. The moment she implied she'd publicly reveal things about the monarchy. The moment WME agents exchanged glances like soldiers deciding whether to advance or retreat. WME eventually managed to convince her, at least temporarily, to let them handle the next steps diplomatically, which was code for contain the situation before it burns the entire industry down. And the first step in containing the situation? Finding a designer willing to dress her. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. In the fashion world, dressing someone isn't just sewing fabric. It's pledging allegiance. It's staking reputation. It's risking backlash. And Meghan Markle is, for designers, the definition of high risk. WME started discreetly reaching out the same afternoon. A few cautious inquiries here, a few hypothetical questions there. Nothing publicly, nothing written, everything whispered. But even whispers can echo. And these whispers echoed in ways WME did not expect. Because the feedback came back almost instantly, and it was chillingly consistent. A paraphrased chorus of, "We love Meghan, but not for this theme. We adore her. But this risks alienating the palace. She's iconic, but this is dangerous. We support her, just not in a royal-themed dress." Then came the most common response of all. The one designers were too polite to put bluntly, but the meaning was unmistakable. "This could be career suicide for us." Think about that. Designers, global fashion houses with decades-long reputations, were afraid. Afraid of royal backlash, public controversy, international humiliation, symbolic missteps, optics disasters, and headlines that would overshadow their work. And here's where the emotional punch hits. Meghan had no idea any of this was happening. WME tried to keep the early rejections quiet, not out of secrecy, but out of fear that revealing them would cause Meghan to escalate again. After all, she had already threatened to tell her truth if she wasn't given what she wanted. So WME tiptoed, gingerly, carefully, nervously. Meanwhile, Meghan assumed things were moving smoothly. But the reality? The reality was a slow, painful, diplomatic bloodbath. Because designer after designer declined. Some politely, some nervously, some with heavy disclaimers, some with no explanation at all. The first rejection came from Valentino. A senior WME agent approached them quietly, asking if they'd consider dressing Meghan for the Met Gala, especially given her unique alignment with the theme. Valentino's response: "We adore the Duchess. But a princess gown, under this theme, could be interpreted as political. We cannot risk it." Political, a word the fashion world avoids like a virus. Next, they approached Dior, Meghan's dream label according to some. But Dior's response was even sharper. "We must remain neutral in global royal narratives. It would be inappropriate." Neutral. In other words, we're not stepping into your war. Then came Givenchy, once a Meghan favorite. Givenchy's response was the politest of all. "We deeply admire her. But this particular theme requires delicate handling. We cannot participate in anything that may be seen as commentary on royalty." There it was again, commentary. The word that made designers sweat. Then another house, one that insiders won't name even anonymously, said something that stunned the WME team. "Dressing Meghan for a royal-themed Met Gala could damage our relationship with Kensington Palace. Damage their relationship with Kate." That was the moment WME realized this wasn't just difficult. It was nearly impossible. Designers weren't just afraid of controversy. They were afraid of choosing sides. And choosing Meghan's side in a royal-themed year? That was a side few were willing to stand on. Because whether Meghan wants to admit it or not, the global fashion world views Kate Middleton as the gold standard of modern royal elegance. They trust her. They admire her. They rely on her. Aligning with Meghan, publicly. In a theme about crowns? That's a gamble most houses simply wouldn't take. But here's where the story gets even more twisted. Because as designer after designer declined behind closed doors, WME began panicking. Not just because they couldn't secure a gown, but because they knew the next phone call they needed to make would be the most dangerous one of all. The call to Meghan. But before they could break the news, something unexpected happened. Meghan called them first. She was excited, radiant, breathless, and she had news. "I found a designer. They're in. They're already working on sketches." WME froze. Because Meghan hadn't told them she was approaching designers on her own. She hadn't cleared it with them. She hadn't coordinated any strategy. She had gone rogue. Again, this wasn't just impulsive, it was dangerous. Designers talk. Fashion houses communicate. News travels. And Meghan's solo outreach could jeopardize whatever slim opportunities WME had left. But Meghan wasn't thinking about strategy. She was thinking about triumph. The designer she had found was big. Very big. Not Dior level, but still elite. And apparently, this designer said all the things Meghan wanted to hear. "Yes, the theme suits you. Yes, we'd love to create something bold. Yes, your story is powerful. Yes, a princess gown could work." And the most dangerous phrase of all, "We'd be honored." WME didn't know whether to celebrate or go into cardiac arrest. Because a designer saying yes is good. But a designer saying yes without understanding the geopolitical storm behind the theme? That's deadly. And that wasn't the end of the twist. Because when Meghan forwarded the initial sketches to WME, the room turned ice cold. Because the dress wasn't just regal. It wasn't just symbolic. It wasn't just dramatic. It was provocative. One agent whispered, "This isn't a gown, this is a statement." Another said, "A statement? No. This is a declaration of war." The gown, based on the early sketch, featured a structured bodice reminiscent of historical royal coronation gowns, a gold-embroidered motif symbolizing elevation, a sweeping cape-like train evoking royal regalia, subtle crown-like accents, a silhouette unmistakably inspired by Princess Diana. Yes, Diana, the one comparison Meghan claims to avoid. And WME knew instantly, if Meghan wears this dress, the world will explode. But Meghan didn't see danger. She saw destiny. Her voice sparkled through the phone when she said, "You guys, this is it. This is the dress that will change everything." But before anyone at WME could muster the courage to respond, she delivered the line that pushed the entire situation into crisis mode. "And the designer says they're ready to go public with me as their Met Gala muse. As soon as we confirm the invitation." Public. with her as their muse, before a ticket was even secured, before Anna Wintour had even heard her name, before the palace had braced itself. WME agents exchanged looks that said everything. This is spiraling. Fast. Dangerously fast. But Meghan wasn't done, because what she said in the next breath made the situation infinitely more volatile. And if the Met Gala hesitates, this designer is willing to take it to the press. They know I deserve to be there. A designer threatening to go public? For Meghan? During a royal-themed year? This wasn't enthusiasm. This was nuclear ammunition. Because a designer pushing Meghan publicly would force Anna Wintour's hand, create pressure through social media, turn Meghan into a victim if rejected, ignite a pro-Meghan campaign, trigger British media outrage, estrange fashion houses loyal to Kate.